Howdy again there, YouTube. Back again with another one of this CM046 AK build. Still not sure what I'm going to call it. I had some ideas, but now I'm not thinking those are so good. So I'll continue to think about it. So I used just permanent marker to touch up, so you can see where I touched up the selector marking there, but you really can't see it any other place I used it. So anywhere that there's a little bit of black missing, that permanent marker really works the trick, especially if you don't plan on repainting it. Sometimes the permanent marker can interact with whatever paint you're using over the top, so that's one word of caution about using it all over the place. So I noticed on this gearbox and other parts that there's a lot of oxidation going on here, so wherever I got it from, the guy must have stored it somewhere a little bit wet. And it's pretty much all over. And it's got this little dingus hanging off the top here for the blowback. And the blowback is really overly complex and yet somehow weak at the same time mechanism. So I don't know that I'm going to be putting it back, and with that being the case, I don't know that I even need this weird thing on the gearbox. So I might go ahead and just replace that with the standard gearbox. Hopefully the other parts I can get to fit to cover up everything, but what I noticed when I took this thing apart is this has the infamous or famous CM029 stamp inside. The same stamp that you would get if you bought a Cyma metal receiver as a replacement. And I noticed that they use some tape in there to hold it in. That's kind of tricky. This is a 2011 version gun, so it's 7 years old now, and they've come a long way. Well, you know what I mean. They've come a ways since then as far as putting the stuff together. But this front end's okay. It's just basically a Cyma CM028 made in steel. So it's just heavier, but it's got a nice trunnion and everything on it. This is part of the blowback mechanism here. You can see there's a lever that runs alongside of that top of the gearbox, and it kicks this lever back, which pushes against a spring, which moves the bolt cover back and forth. And it's really weak. I mean, it's unbelievably weak. But once you get the thing apart, you can kind of see why it is, because it's got this little plastic arm kicking the action back and forth. So it probably will be deleted, I'm guessing. I'll probably just delete it. So, been working on this Pro Win hop up, and because this gearbox has this funky thing on the front, I cut the ears off, which I'm not sorry I did it, because this way it makes it easier to assemble and disassemble the gun. Maybe I'm giving up a little bit of air seal. I don't know. I doubt it. I really doubt it, because they're locked in place and fitted. And that's something that I learned on this project, and something to remind myself for later, is that there are these little ears on both of these. I never noticed them on these because I guess they're just, because they're injection molded, they just kind of fit anyway. But these little ears are there to index against this shoulder. Actually both shoulders, but mainly against this shoulder. And so when you're having magazine problems, I noticed that when I was fitting this, is you can also adjust where the hop-up nozzle hits the top of the magazine. And I just wasn't aware of that because I never had a problem with it before, but I did on this because I could tell that the gun was not going to go back together. And I was like, well, hey, they put this little pad on there. Well, all I got to do is file that pad, and to get that to where everything lines up where you want it. Where the hole down here, when you assemble it, hits where the magazine well needs to. These holes on top for the screws line up. And then that the overall length is correct to fit back into your receiver flush. If that makes sense. And I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with this. I'll probably end up just getting a different shorter screw. I was thinking about cutting it off as a stud, but I don't think I'm going to mess with that. So you can see in here, this is all top cover blowback stuff. And there is just parts and springs and buffers and pins. The butt plate, but other than that, there is a bunch of stuff involved with that blowback system. And I took some pictures, and I really should have videotaped it. That's the old hop-up. Because it's kind of stupidly complex and crudely done the way that it's put together. So like I said, I have other parts that I can put in. It's got all the bosses for a regular receiver, so that's not a big deal. You know, this receiver is just a replacement, so it has the place to mount the little tray and everything, even though this gun doesn't utilize that. So now, That being said, that wasn't even the point of doing any of this. The whole reason for doing that was to take this stock off so I could refinish it because I hate the color. It's not right. It's really a crappy kind of wood. I'm really considering just buying a nicer stock set because I'm going to play around with this, but chances are this thing's going to break, and I'll show you why. Check out how narrow this freaking wall thickness is. And that's not good wood it's made out of. So that thing's going to pop and crack and break in half. And I noticed a lot, like in Syria and stuff, and Ukraine even, they'll use a polymer pistol grip with a wooden stock set, probably just for that reason. Because I'd imagine even on a real gun, you'd pop that thing down real hard and it could crack that thing in half pretty darn easy. Didn't even mean to do that. I'm surprised I didn't break it in half. But this whole thing's going to get sanded down and restained anyway. But it took me about 45 minutes to get this thing off. And probably part of that is due to the oxidation factor here. But they're not just screwed in like a regular piece of wood. They've got these little threaded wood screw inserts on them. And these particular ones were locked together. So the only way I could get one off was with an impact driver, driving it in and out, in and out, in and out. So I'm going to have to put some oversized ones and glue them in there properly. These were just threaded, and that's why they spun. Plus they're rusted. And they used thread locker on this thing like it was paint. So that's another problem with trying to get some of this other stuff off. Is that they just painted on the thread locker. So that's your problem if you can't get this stock off. Don't break these tabs off because you pretty much ruined the receiver. But not really that big a deal. These are about, I don't know, 30, 40 bucks online. So not really that critical. It's not like it's a specific receiver for this gun. I'd say probably the only specific thing is this little nub and the stuff that's in the bag there. And this can't be removed from the gearbox at all. So if this part breaks, your little blowback dealio ain't going to work anyway. So yeah, the way I got this lower one off is I was able, because this thing's kind of under spring tension. If you've done any of these, you know that. And this thing was frozen together on each side of this. So it was just spinning. And it was just chewing a bigger hole in the stock. And there was nothing I could do about that. So what I did is I got it loose and I worked it back and forth, and it had already spun a big hole, so there was room for it to move around. And this part had already popped out because it's kind of like a spring tension thing, you know, it wants to pop out. Which is another thing when you put it back together, be careful to tighten them slowly as you go in, because you can snap this thing off right here and then you're pretty much hosed. So what I did is this thing now was popped up as a unit, and I took some really narrow forked needle nose and I grabbed on to this and was able with the impact drill to back that thing out of there. So that's how I did that, in case you have the same problem. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but it all worked out. It just took a little longer. Like I tell my wife, you know, you can't stop me, you can only slow me down. I'll get you eventually. Whether I break it in half or not, it's eventually going to get, what I want to do is going to get done. So sanding, then I have some references with some AKs in them, but I'm not really happy with the pictures. I want to find one that's as close to original patina as possible, and then take that down and try to match the stain against the little cans in the store. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to sand this really lightly. I don't want to take any of the contour out of it. I don't want to, you know, really sand it too hard. In fact, I might even try to go for a laminated stock look. So I might take some picture reference pictures for a laminated stock, because it's kind of a similar color from what I've seen. And to a light color, because that's what I want to do. I could do it red, and I've done that a bunch of times on other Russian style rifles. So I kind of want to do something a little bit different. But I figured if I sanded it real light and left this dark color underneath, then I could put that blonde stain over the top, and maybe it would leave it kind of laminated looking, even though it's not. It's just some piece of junky wood. Don't even know what kind, but it's not good. So, and then also another thing real quick is there seems to be these little gaskets that they put on here, and that'll be something I'll replicate out of foam probably. when I put it back together, but this one was missing, and I noticed when I first got it that this back handguard was a little bit loose, and so there you go. It needs a little bit of gasket, and that may or may not be missing because these guns are a little bit older now, so you never know what you might need to repair or replace, or it gives you a little hassle. You know, you don't like that wobble. Well, there's a little bit of wobble everywhere, but throughout this video I'll show you how to fix that because I've done it on other ones and it works out pretty well without making any kind of extreme modifications to anything. Although I did modify this one, it only took me about 30 minutes, I'd say, to get it the way I wanted it, because it needed a little kick down in the back. It couldn't be flat. I dremeled it, well, cut it with the wheel and then filed it flat, but then I noticed that it needed a little bit of a chamfer down here to clear this deal. And I don't like this air nozzle one bit. I don't like the way this thing looks, so it's a good thing I took it out because it's getting completely rebuilt. This motor's gonna go away too. I'm really not sure with the motor choice yet, but since I have high torque gears coming, I think I'll probably go with, since I like those ASG Infinities, probably one of the 18,000 RPM motors. So it'll just be a real chunky chunk 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 chunk. And combined with that MOSFET, because I will wire it as a MOSFET since I'm going to just do the whole thing. Like I said, I might not use the shell, but that doesn't matter. So then I'll be able to tune the thing a little bit easier and a little bit more realistic along a regular gun, AK-47 rate of fire. That's the ultimate goal now. I want to leave it fairly stock on the outside. Like I said, it's going to have a red retro arms trigger, so that's going to be kind of a giveaway that it's not stock. But it should be a really fun build, and I hope you hang around and watch me. So that's going to be it for this section. This was just kind of, man, that was not fun getting that off. So good luck to you if you're trying. And thanks for watching, and see you next time.